Welcome to the Horse Girl Gazetteer. Join Georgia and Kate as we dive into this week's conversation. From health and fitness to communication and understanding, we are determined to develop our maps and help you to develop yours.
Hello, I'm Kate.
I'm Georgia.
And today we are going to talk about another fun analogy for thinking about your relationship with your horse and your program with your horse. And one of the things I think about is that each partnership is a little bit like a ship. So you are the captain of the ship that is your journey with your horse. And there are very few ships that make successful voyages with only one person on board. So, in order to have a successful journey, you're probably going to need to find some crew members to help you pilot your ship and, I don't know, do ship stuff on it. I guess it would be a better analogy if I knew more about ships. But the idea being that you need a crew. You need a trainer, a veterinarian. You need somebody to help you understand nutrition or make suggestions. There's a lot of people that are involved in your horse's experience and your experience being successful. And it doesn't take away from your achievement as the captain of this ship to have other people on board supporting you. So we have today somebody with us who is a really important person on my ship and a supporter of my horse journey. This is Asa Woodman, who works with lots of riders, helping them have successful relationships with their horses by focusing on kind of the roles of the rider in their relationship. So Osa, do you want to introduce kind of what you do and how you think about your role?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you for having me, Kate and Georgia. So I have been a therapist for a long time and a horse person for a long time. And I now work exclusively with equestrians and doing sports psychology, but it's a little bit of a twist of sports psychology because it's not really just about, winning. It's a lot more. And I came to that because I was at a clinic actually at Hideaway with a clinician. We don't need to name names, but one of the horses kept stopping, and the rider, that was this teenager rider, was on this horse, and the horse kept stopping, and the clinician kept saying, add more. So add more leg, add more stick. And finally the horse planted its feet completely and would not move. And add more leg and add more pressure did not work. And it took everything in me not to run out there and say, this is not about the horse, this is about the teenager. She's terrified. And it something just clicked in my brain. I was like, wow, we really have to get better as riders, as horse handlers, at doing our own work so we don't put it onto the horse. And then the horse gets punished for our stuff.
Yeah.
So that's why I got into it. And yeah.
Cool.
That's what I do.
Awesome. So we have this idea that we have been talking about in this podcast of how you can kind of visualize your own horse experience as like a map where you, on your journey, you travel through kind of different areas of experience, and you might spend more time in one area, and you may kind of come back to the same concepts again, and going through one area is going to take you to a new place, and that kind of helps organize your information and helps you kind of think about where you're going, where you've been, how to get different places, and how different concepts of horsemanship relate to one another. So taking that idea, can you share with us some of the things that are kind of would be on your map? What are some of your experiences as a horse person yourself, as somebody working with other horse people? What are some of kind of the features on your map? Where have you spent time in your own horse career that's been important to you?
Well, I'm a type A personality, competitive person. And I think a lot of people in this, in all kinds of different equestrian sports are type A and competitive. And I think we have a tendency to then put that onto our horses. And so I have gotten to learn many, many times the outcome of that, which is not positive. And that means that there can be injuries, there can be a horse shutting down, you lose the relationship. So for my roadmap, one of the things that I keep coming back to is the relationship with my horse, right? What am I asking of him? Is it fair what I'm asking of him? Does he want to do it? Is he here with me? And so I keep coming back to what's happening with the relationship. Are we building a stronger bond, or am I weakening my bond by what I'm asking and doing? I'd say that's probably my guiding post through all of the different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in that, like from that experience, what are some of the things that you do with your clients, like when you're working with people? What are some of the the strategies that you have to kind of work through that or kind of address that?
Yeah. So first of all, I think people come to me and they're like, well, I have a problem with my, I freeze when I go into, going through the start gate in my show jumping or whatever. And they think that they come to me just to fix this one thing, right? But how we do one thing is how we do everything. So the problem isn't just about the start gate. It's about life and how you do life, right? So a lot of what I do with people is we start to sort of peel away the layers and figure out what are their underlying beliefs about themselves. What are the unconscious patterns that they have and how they live their life. I think it's like 90 to 95% of our choices are actually unconscious. And we think that we have a roadmap and we think that we're making these really conscious choices, but actually they're based on things that happened way back in childhood where we developed these ideas about who we are and what we like, which might not actually be true.
Right.
So I do a lot of like, let's peel away and let's see who you are underneath all of it. Most of the time, what I find with equestrian is this little boy and little girl who just loves horses.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And somewhere along the line, they forgot that they just used to just get happy by looking at their like Palomino pony with the flowing mane, and that's all it took, right? But now all of a sudden, there's shows and there's all this stuff. So how I do that is I do somatic work. So we go into the body because it's all in the body. You can't think your way through this stuff. People, like a lot of sports psychology, still to this day, they think it's like a thinking error, So if we just change the thinking, then we can correct the problem. And just like with a horse, it's not actually it, right? We have to like go underneath and discover what's happening inside of your body. And it's really cool and really fun because it's really helpful for people. Painful sometimes because there's oftentimes stuff. There's a reason we don't go into the body. It's because there's a lot of pain in there. There's hurt, there's disappointment, and there's fears and all those things. But then there's also the joy, excitement, and fun and play.
Right.
But we can't just like pick one of them.
Right.
Like, they're all there. So that's what I help people do. I help them get into their body, experience what they're feeling, kind of disassemble these beliefs they've created about themselves and who they should be or shouldn't be, and get to the real being in there, which is, like I said, usually a horse crazy little boy or girl that just wants to play with ponies.
Right. That's so powerful because that's like the same thing we do with the horses too. It's like they don't separate how they feel from what they do in the way that we can. And so to like really understand them, it seems like there's a duality there in the relationship where it's probably going to go both ways. It's going to help you understand yourself and also understand your horse's experience too, because they're very much living in the present.
Completely. And if we're talking about like the roadmap and what I talked about relationships, it's like if you're not present and in your body, then it's actually impossible to have a relationship with someone else or something else, like a horse or a human being. It's like based on these false ideas. Yeah. Right. You're not really present. And horses only live in the present moment. That's it. you know? So the greatest gift we can give them is to be totally present in our body with them, not thinking about like, oh, but the show tomorrow, or like, what's everyone out there looking at me? Am I not doing it right? It's like, then you're out of the moment, you're out of your body, and your horse is like, well, I can't trust you now.
Right. Well, and it's so interesting because they know, right? If you're totally freaked out about the horse show tomorrow, the horse has no idea.
Yes.
Like they're wondering where the saber-toothed tiger is because
Yes.
that's what their brain understands as fear.
Totally.
And so that spook that you had, they don't know.
Yes.
They don't know that your butt cheeks were all tight because of you're afraid of being embarrassed tomorrow.
Yes. Totally.
They think
totally.
it's a potential fatality.
Yeah.
Which is a totally different way of thinking about like a disobedience too.
Completely. And that's the thing. It's like that whole thing, like leave your stuff at the barn door, drives me nuts because essentially what you're telling people, stuff it all inside, and then go inside and pretend you're okay. Which like you can't pretend with a horse.
You can't pretend.
No. Maybe you'll fool your trainer or like your barn mates. They might like not know, but your horse is like can feel what's going on inside of you. It's like, what's wrong?
Yeah.
What's wrong? Why are we worried?
Yeah. Right.
Why are we worried? You know?
And they're supposed to feel like you're the leader.
Yes.
And if you as the leader are petrified, even if you're faking it, they know. Totally.
So I think the most important thing is for us to get more real. You know, if you're having a hard day, if you're having a bad day, if you're scared, tell your trainer. Get real about it. Because the thing is, too, as soon as you voice the things, it takes the power out of them.
Yeah.
So it's one of the first things I tell people. It's like, well, do you tell your trainer when you get scared? They're like, no. I don't want to seem like, I'm like, no, voice it. Yeah. Stop pretending.
Yeah.
Ask for help. Like you talked about, like we have all these people around us. Ask.
Yeah.
Have the right people around you. Right. The ones that you can say, help.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's something that you and I were talking about earlier, Kate, is like the people on your ship should be people that you hired because you trust them. Yes. Because they are the experts and they will help you. So if somebody's on your ship, they're there for a reason.
Totally.
And if they're not giving you that,
then find a new person.
Maybe find a new person for your ship.
Put them in a lifeboat and send them off.
Very politely and professionally, but
go to a different ship.
Yeah, find a different ship or a different crew member to fill that role for you.
You were talking about like where you kind of find people falling back into. Are there specific exercises or anything like that that you find yourself returning to with multiple clients that are kind of universally helpful?
Yeah, there's a few. There's one that I call it the slow down process. I mean, I developed this, but there's probably a million different ways to do this, and there's probably lots of other people who would say I developed that because it's really about the body. And so, what it is kind of goes by steps. But first, you take a couple of breaths, which the breath tends to bring you back to the moment, and then you drop down into your body. So you notice your throat, your chest, and your gut. Those are the three main communication centers. There's actually more messages going from your gut and your heart into your brain than the other way around, which I think is really fascinating because we tend to not listen. Most of us know when we're hungry, that message, but most of us don't know when we're feeling a little bit of fear and we might need a hug or we might need whatever. It's like we've turned most of those off. So the messages are still happening, but we're not listening. So we drop into the body and we listen to what the throat, the chest, and the gut is saying. And usually it's sensation. So I call it the language of sensations. And that's really our body's way of speaking to us and telling us what we need. These are things that we should learn when we're tiny and small. Because if we're little and we grow that, when little kids and we're like, what are you feeling in your, in your chest right now? It's like, oh, there's like tightness. Well, what is your body saying? It's like, I'm kind of feeling scared. Well, what do you need? Can you just hold me for a bit? Right? It's like, but we don't learn to do that. Right. So I teach people to drop into their body and just start to pay attention to their body and what it's saying. And oftentimes in the beginning, you don't know what it's saying. But then the more you listen, the more you know. And then eventually it's like automatic. But it's like a practice, and you can do it when you're driving. You can do it when you go to bed if you want to close your eyes. But just go into your body, pay attention. And then like the next steps, obviously, like when you know what it's saying, then you ask for support. I say you have three choices. You can ask, act, or allow. So asking is you bring someone else into whatever's happening. Act is, you might ask your trainer to lower the fence, or allow is, I'm going to allow this feeling to be there. It's like a little bit of fear, but I'm going to allow it to be there. I'm not going to push it away. I'm going to allow it to be there, and I'm still going to jump the fence. But it's 3 very conscious choices. Right. So this is moving beyond. This is how we start to live in a much more conscious way and not letting the unconscious make all the choices for us. But it starts in our body.
Yeah. Cool.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
I can't remember what the question was.
That was a really good answer. I was asking about like what common strategies and stuff. Yeah.
So that's one of the ones. I can give you one more. That's like a super like, and this one is fairly like, I feel like this is a pretty well-known one in the therapy world, but it's one of the quickest ways, because obviously a lot of people that come to me have fear and anxiety. It's like one of the most common things from professionals to amateurs. It's like something has either happened or they've seen something happen. The little kiddo I just work with, who's like is jumping cross rails, is like afraid of a rotational fall. It's because she had watched videos of a rotational fall. Right. So it's now in her head, she thinks that could happen. Now I could say like there's no way that could happen with a cross rail, but that's my brain talking to her body. Right. It doesn't work, right? So we didn't go that way. We went through the body. And so one of the things I do is, because fear and anxiety lives in the future. It's always about the future. Yeah. What's going to happen? What could happen? So one of the quickest way to get into the moment, into right now, is through your senses. So they call it the 5 senses. And essentially, you go through 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, but you don't have to do it that way. I usually do like, okay, what do I see? I see a light. What do I hear? I hear a fan. What do I feel or touch? I can touch my fingers. What do I smell? And what do I taste? Tacos. Can you guys feel how things? Yeah. So the senses start using a different part of the brain, and that's why you all of a sudden get into right now. So that's one I usually say, like, okay, before you go to the in-gate or at the in-gate, when you're in the start box, do the 5 senses, and you're like, you're right here.
So we've talked a lot about like bringing yourself into the present moment to be with your horse. And in your opinion, from what you've seen, what is the human's ideal role in their relationship with their horse? They've come to the moment. What are they there to do?
I mean, I kind of think of it, you're there to be a parent in some way, and just like a good parent guides their child, right? They don't demand that their child do different things. They create ways for the children to make good choices, right? If the child does something that's absolutely unacceptable, they teach them why that doesn't work, and they give them a better option. It's like, yeah, I think if we think about it as a parenting role, then we can be much more gentle, and not come from a punitive, or, what's wrong with you? Why did you do that? Like, I think about that sometimes. I'm like, if we treat them, I think Lindsay says like as for like toddlers, essentially. Yeah. Like toddlers make mistakes all the time. That's part of being a toddler, and our role is not to make fun of them, it's to support them, So if we come from a supporting role, like a parenting, teaching role, then that's a really beautiful relationship. And you learn from them too, right? Because we learn from the children. So we learn from the horses too. There's like a give and take in teaching and learning.
Yeah, absolutely. Where do you find that there's like a disconnect? Like where do you see people commonly coming from that is not that parental role?
Oh, like a dominating, like I have to dominate this horse, and that comes from fear. Anytime you want to dominate, it's from a fear-based perspective, and people say, oh, you have to be a really strong leader. And like, if you think about that in relationship with your kid, like, you want a really strong leader. It's like, no, you don't. You want a really loving and supportive parent, right? But I think because horses are so big and can be quite scary, then we as human beings, we want to control. It's kind of part of our thing. It's like human beings want to control. We want to control freaking everything. And control never creates relationship.
I think it's interesting to think about, like, the only thing that you can control in your relationship with your horse or anything is yourself.
Yes.
And to pair that with the idea of good leadership.
Yes.
And leadership that's a more parental type of leadership than a dictatorial type of leadership or a punitive type of leadership is really interesting.
Yeah.
Thought. An interesting question is thinking about how to balance being able to listen to your horse and provide them with enough structured leadership for them to feel secure and safe. Because I think it's fairly commonly known that overly permissive parenting is terrifying to kids.
Yes.
And it's nice to say, well, I really want to listen to my horse, and I want to, like, offer them opportunities to make choices and to be able to find where the balance point is between listening and being overly allowing. I think is a big challenge.
Totally.
In all relationships.
In all relationships, right? And it's like, you know, the way people parent themselves and the way they deal with their horses. And, you know, if you don't have boundaries with your kids or your partner, you probably don't have boundaries with your horse. And boundaries are really important because I am me and you are you, and I get to create boundaries around what's okay for me and what's not okay for me, right? Yeah. And that's really important as a human being to be able to do that. And it's important that we teach our children that and our horses that, right? It's like,
how do you define boundaries? Because that's actually, like, not obvious, I think. I think there are different ideas about what is a boundary.
Yeah.
Like, what's a boundary versus a rule versus an ultimatum versus how do you define that, or explain how you define that too?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we, you know, in regards to boundaries, there's rigid boundaries, there's porous boundaries, and then there's, what's the healthy one? It's called healthy boundaries. I don't know. I can't remember what it's called.
We can call that.
But those boundaries have some flexibility.
Yeah.
Right. And we need to have some flexibility. So, for example, people in regards to horses, for example, people are like, oh, he's never allowed to walk into my space. Right. That's a very rigid boundary. Right. You know, obviously, if you have a horse that you're working with and they're aggressive and you're working through some old traumas, like, then you might have to have very clear boundaries around your space. Most people don't have that horse, you know? And when we have healthy boundaries and when you are in your body, you can feel why the horse is coming into your space. Are they coming into your space to, you know, be alpha and push you around? Are they coming into your space to connect with you? Right. You know? And so the more aware we are of what we're feeling in our body, the more aware we're going to be in that regards. So I really think that knowing what your boundary is in your space is really important, right? We all have different bubbles. I call them bubbles. Yeah. Like, and some people are like, I don't want humans in my space. And some people are like, I'll hug anyone, right? And with horses, I see two things. It's like, there's the people who are like, absolutely not in my space ever, you know? Yeah. And they're the like, correct people, you know? I would not want them as my parent, you know? Right. And then there are the people who are like, oh, I love him so much. And they're like just snuggling the horse. And like, in general, horses actually don't love to snuggle. No, it's like when you watch them in the field, they don't snuggle each other. Right. They might do mutual grooming. Right. You know, so find the place on the horse that they like to be groomed. But I think it's important to know what's okay with you, know what's not okay with you. But then you go deeper, like, why is that okay and what's that not okay? Right. Right? Because sometimes we see things, we're like, well, I learned from my trainer that this is not okay. It's like, well, why? You know, go deeper. And I think for someone to be like, we're all on a journey, right? It's like the horse person I am today, in 5 years, I might laugh at that. Yeah. And be like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't know this. Yeah. You know, hopefully, because we keep learning, right? But I think the more we can ask ourselves, like, why am I doing this? Then I think we learn more. And then I think we create more of a fair relationship with our horses. Right. And our partners and all of them. Life.
Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not easy.
No. Simple, but hard.
Simple, but hard. Like most good things.
Yes.
Kate, you have some strong feelings about
I do.
Fair relationships.
I do.
Do you want to get into it a little bit?
Yes. So there's, I mean, most of us, if you're a horse person, have seen the very cute little, like, meme or the, I don't know, bumper sticker or whatever that says, my therapist has 4 legs, or I have a horse because it's cheaper than therapy, or, my horse is my therapist. And that is, I just get all fired up because to my mind, that's really unfair to the horse. The idea that we would buy a horse, bring it into our care, become the kind of caregiver steward for this entire life of this being with thoughts and feelings, and then saddle it with all of our baggage. That doesn't seem fair to the horse. And as a therapist yourself, kind of what are your thoughts on that? And I think, there's a lot of people who, that sounds really lovely, that we would have a therapeutic relationship with our horses. And I think, like, what do you see that people who maybe are like, well, I kind of think about my horse that way. What are they looking for? And how can they be in a relationship with a horse that's meaningful, but that isn't, and I'm going to state this strongly because I believe it strongly, kind of exploiting their relationship with their horse?
Yeah. Yeah, your horse is not your therapist. And also, it's not cheaper.
Right? Right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we hear it a lot. And there's, like you said, a lot of bumper stickers. And it's like a thing. It's like, yeah, my horse is my therapist. If we go back to what I said in the beginning, that I think about the relationship with your horse as your parental role. So it's like, my child is my therapist. I think we can all see how messed up that is.
Yeah.
Like, is the child suited to be your therapist? No. Is it fair to them to put your stuff on your child? No. Are they capable of dealing with your stuff? No. Will you mess up your child if you do that? Yes. Right?
Yeah.
One of the reasons I love doing somatic work with humans in regards to horses is because horses are really in tune with sensations and stuff. They're,
For their survival.
For their survival, exactly. They're prey animals. And so they sense a lot of things, right? And if we're coming in there with all this like blah, 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 and we rely on them to make us feel better, I mean, when you really think about it, I hope most people, when you really think about it, you can see how insane that is.
Yeah.
And how absolutely unfair. Because your horse did not choose to come into your care, to live in a barn, even if they live outside, to go cross country. They didn't choose any of that, right?
Yeah.
They didn't choose. So it is up to us to do our absolute best at taking care of them and showing up for them in a way that's supportive for them.
Yeah.
Right? That doesn't mean like that if you're having a hard day and you're sad that you can't like have those feelings around your horse. That's totally fine, But don't go to your horse to fix you.
Right.
Right? That's the
Yes.
difference, right?
Yeah, totally.
Talk to your trainer, talk to a human, talk to them. You can be sad on your horse. I mean, I do equine therapy, or used to. It's like, I have people being sad on the horse, but it's not the horse's responsibility to make you feel better.
Right.
Right? It's like, anytime we place responsibility on someone else or something, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Like, personal responsibility, I think, is one thing, probably the biggest thing lacking in today's society, and especially in raising kids. It's like, we're not teaching personal responsibility.
Totally.
You are responsible for your feelings.
Yes.
And it is your responsibility to ask for what you need in regards to your feelings. People will help you, but it's on you.
Yeah.
Right? So I think when you talk about the ship, it's like, have the people on your ship, the crew, that you can tell these things to, that you can talk to, they can be there for you, so that you can really show up for your horse. Just like we want to really show up for the children, right?
Yeah.
Not your therapist.
And we know a few good ones.
A few good therapists.
We do.
Yeah.
Because that is so important. It's the horse's mind, body is one.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes we try to separate that, and we think about riding as a very physical sport. It's such a small percentage of riding is the physical part.
Yes.
And that's huge.
Yes.
But I think the mental game and the emotional game and the intuition and the feeling, both physically and emotionally, is such a big piece that we sometimes are like, well, I've got that already. Oh, I don't know. I think we're all a work in progress.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a bummer that the mental emotional piece, oftentimes people don't start working on that until they get into the higher levels.
Right.
Like all the
Right.
like higher level writers have sports psychologists and coaches for
Yeah.
that. They all do. But on the lower levels, almost no one does. And
Yeah.
I was actually talking to a soccer coach about this the other day because I branched into a little bit of other sports, which is really fun.
Cool.
And he coaches high school, and he's like, I want to start this in middle school. I want to teach them about the mental, emotional game and how to set a foundation there when they're younger.
Yeah.
And even more so important with horses,
Right.
because we're sitting on a living being
Yes.
that has feelings.
Yeah.
You know, and is mostly scared about the world.
Right.
It's like for good reasons.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so for us to take responsibility for how we show up is so important. And we owe it to them.
Yeah.
They let us sit on them.
Yes.
Like they let us sit on them and go out and do all these things. Like we owe it to them to do our own work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe that very strongly.
Me too.
Is there anything else that you have like at the top of your brain that you're like, we should talk about this?
I mean, I think we covered like the things that I'm like the most passionate about. Honestly, like for whoever listens to this, like if you haven't worked with a sports psychologist, like try it out because it's really cool. And it's really cool to see the difference in your horse and the difference in how you and your horse work together. Because I know we say, oh, it's a partnership, but is it really? If you're not totally on the same page and working together. Yeah. If you don't know what they need and they don't know what you need, and it's this like then it's not. Yeah. So it's like, how can I make this partnership a real partnership? Yeah. And to do that, you got to do some work on yourself.
Yeah. And it's not easy.
No.
But it's so worth it.
It's so worth it.
So worth it.
And everything gets better. It's not just your writing or that stuff. Like your life gets better. Yeah. Yeah. Which is like, that's worth it.
Right? Well, your horse knows who you are as a person.
Yes.
They do. They just know.
Yes.
And sometimes, they say like a horse is a mirror. And sometimes they show us things that we maybe wish we could have ignored.
Yeah.
But like, what a gift to be able to have something so motivating and such a reason to like address the hard stuff.
Totally.
And to like dig it up and look at it with some help sometimes and like deal with it and put it where it belongs or
100%
live with it.
We're so lucky. Like having horses in our lives we're so lucky. Yeah. Because not only is it amazing and special and brings that like giddy little girl or boy in us at times, but it also teaches us so much. And I think probably one of the number one things is patience.
Yep.
Well, Asa, thank you for joining us. If people have heard all the things that you've said and are like, wow, I could really use a conversation with Asa, where can they find you?
TheRealEquestrian.com or The Real Equestrian on Instagram, Facebook. But my website's probably the easiest.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Fabulous.
Awesome. Thank you so much,
Thank
Asa.
you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us this week at the Horse Girl Gazetteer. You can find us online at Horse Girl Gazetteer on Facebook or Instagram, and you can listen wherever you find your podcasts. You can also email us questions or comments at horsegirlgazetteer@gmail.com. Georgia can be found at Equine Virtual Assistant on Instagram and Facebook, and Kate can be found at Hideaway Acres on Facebook and Hideaway Acres Horse Farm on Instagram. If you found yourself enjoying our content, please leave a review to help others find their way to us. We appreciate any and all support. Talk to you later.